Welcome back to Misogyny. I'm your host, Hannah Blue. You're listening to episode 71. Everybody has something to teach you. That is the topic of today's show, and this was told to me years ago by a former supervisor of mine, Dr. Tiffany Harper. Dr. Harper sat me down for a little discussion, not an evaluation. I felt it was on her heart to say what she had to say to me, but she closed with, everybody has something to teach you. And for years, I have kept her words in the back of my mind, and they're true. There are a lot of people who are looked over in the world. Sometimes it's for petty reasons. Maybe they don't have enough money, or maybe they didn't finish college. In the end, none of that matters. Where the real value lies is the lessons they have to teach you. In running this show, I've learned many things, especially from people around the world. Even as a child, I loved learning about other countries and their cultures. It's always been my goal to share my passion with you, the listener. I think a lot of misunderstandings wouldn't exist if we allowed ourselves to open our minds and learn from people who do not look like us and may not think the way we do. It takes a lot of energy to hate. It weighs you down, makes you tired, and it makes you look much older than you might actually be. Hate has never helped anybody. I wish more people would understand that. But we can't afford to focus on that. Life is short. And I'd rather spend mine learning as many lessons as I can from different folks. So what are we learning today? I'm so glad you asked. Let's get ready for our first stop, Mississippi, USA. Let's talk about Sesame Street. Can you imagine it was almost banned in the 70s? Yeah, that's right. Good old Mississippi. The state my grandparents were born in, almost banned Sesame Street in 1970. And why? It had black cast members. Go figure. Now, Sesame Street began airing in 1969, and for over 50 years, it has been a staple in millions of households. Now, who doesn't love Bert and Ernie, Oscar, Cookie Monster, and Big Bird? I don't know one person that has anything bad to say about Sesame Street. And if they do, they need to get their heads examined. Well, in 1970, there was some drama brewing around Sesame Street, and it all came from Mississippi. The Mississippi Authority for Educational Television, also known as the State Commission for Educational Television, held a meeting in January 1970. There were only 5 people on the panel, educators and private citizens, including a principal, a teacher, and a banker. The banker was James McKay, and his father-in-law was Allen Thompson. Thompson retired after 20 years of being the mayor of Jackson. Here's what's interesting. Thompson also founded Focus, otherwise known as Freedom of Choice. It was an activist group that claimed they wanted freedom of choice in public schools, but let me tell you what that freedom of choice was. Segregation. You know, I'm not surprised my grandmother fled Mississippi. Do you know when they had their first integrated prom? 2008. But back to Sesame Street. It was pioneered by Joan Gaines Cooney, a former journalist, TV producer, and the executive director of the Children's Television Workshop. The cast of Sesame Street was integrated. Matt Robinson and Loretta Long, known as Gordon and Susan, starred with white actors Jada Rowland and Bob McGrath. The kids on Sesame Street were also integrated. Well, that offended the good old people in Mississippi, and a vote of 3 against 2 stopped ETV from airing Sesame Street. Now, the 2 who were outvoted snitched to the New York Times and they published a notice of the prohibition along with a quote from one of the board members. And the quote said, "Some of the members of the commission were very much opposed to showing the series because it uses a highly integrated cast of children." Now, this person didn't want to be named, and rightfully so. They probably didn't want to have a cross burning in their yard, but I digress. Mainly, the commission members felt that Mississippi was not yet ready for it. Now, this made some people mad in and out of Mississippi. And when the board members were called on the carpet, they spoke anonymously, claiming they had only postponed the show, not banned it. Yeah, right. I think by 1970, people with common sense were just tired of racism, and they spoke out against it. A critic for the Delta Democrat Times wrote, "But Mississippi's ETV Commission won't be showing it for the time being because of one fatal defect as measured by Mississippi's political leadership. Sesame Street is integrated. Some of its leading cast members are Black, including the man who does much of the overt teaching. The neighborhood of the street is a mixed one. And all of that, of course, goes against the Mississippi grain." Joan Gantz Cooney called the decision a tragedy for young people. And fortunately for kids, the tragedy didn't last long. The board reconvened and reversed its original decision to ban Sesame Street and agreed that ETV could air it as soon as they received tapes of the program. Now, Alabama, Memphis, and New Orleans were already helping out parts of Mississippi. Thanks to their feeds, parts of Mississippi could watch the show. In the fall of 1970, the Sesame Street cast appeared in person in Jackson, a brave move by the Black people, and met with representatives from the board. Now, of course, they didn't get an apology, but at least the kids could watch. Sesame Street has won many awards, and they deserved every last one of them. When people say, "Well, why do certain people focus on the past?" I ignore them. We focus on the past for one specific reason, so that we do not repeat history. Also, in this country, I don't know about anywhere else, the past continues to rear its ugly head. We talk about the intolerances of the past because the intolerances have never gone away. And until they do, we're going to still keep talking about them. Some people are very resistant to change, but thank God not everyone is. And the young people on our next stop have introduced a change of their own. It's all going down on our next stop, China. China was the 51st foreign country to join the Amisogyny podcast, and we're showing the love right back by featuring this story. China's Gen Z is shaking up some things in protest to high unemployment. According to Chung Chai-Nien, I hope I'm saying their name right, a chair professor at Hong Kong Polytechnic University, China's economy is struggling, and many young people are struggling to find jobs. So they're moving to the country. China's Gen Z and millennials are posting how they live their lives on social media, and this comes after they quit or got laid off. Yep, this group of people who were born in the 90s or 2000s self-identify as retirees. A 22-year-old retiree goes by the alias of Wincy Dada, says he got tired of dealing with machines and quit to return to his hometown. He tried to find a job, but wasn't happy with the results. He lives in a bamboo shack at the edge of a cliff, and he said, "As time goes by, I begin to think about the meaning of life. Life is not just about the prosperity of the city. The tranquility of the countryside is also a kind of beauty." According to Chung Chai-Nien, it's not surprising that young people are choosing to retreat or retire to the countryside, as it has become very challenging to find a job, especially good jobs in top-tier cities. Allegedly, there's a devaluation of college degrees, and people who have less than that have a harder time finding a job. The unemployment rate of young people in China is at 18.8%. Now, Jobs such as delivery or ride hailing are available, but educated young people don't want to do that. I don't blame them. They also don't want to work in manufacturing. Hey, I understand. College is not easy. You have to be extremely dedicated to finish a 4-year program or even more than that. And once you finish, you should have the opportunity to work in the field you want. And that's for any country. But as far as China's Gen Z and millennials go, they'd rather sit at home with their parents and wait out for a better job. Now, some say these young retirees are too picky or have given up, but they say that's not true. Wenzi says, this is not called lying down. This is called making preparations for retirement in advance so that you can enjoy your old age in the future. I agree. And others say these accusations may seem unfair, but they are understandable in Chinese societal culture and context. The kids are criticized because Chinese people tend to think whoever gets a higher education has to put that in use afterwards and work hard. Dan Wang is a chief economist at Hang Seng Bank, China, and he says this kind of reverse migration is also unlikely to be a long-term trend. It's at most transitory. The ultimate goal for these kids is to still go back to the city in the long run. Well, I can see both sides. Shout out to our new friends in China who have tuned into us. We thank you for your support. Now, this episode is not about advocating for women or people with special needs this week. This is a lighter episode that I'm bringing you guys. So before we move on to our next stop, let's look at a couple recipes. In episode 69, I talked about a self-professed do-nothing man. This week, we're going to talk about do-nothing cake. I don't know about you, but cake always sounds good to me. Let's look at the recipe. Making this cake is as easy as 1, 2, 3. All you need is 1 bowl and 1 pan. This recipe comes from Jess on Budget Bites. Here's what you'll need. 2 cups of sugar, 2 cups of flour, 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, a 20-ounce can of crushed pineapple with the juice, and cooking spray. For the frosting, you need a 1/2 cup of shredded unsweetened coconut, 1 cup or 2 sticks of unsalted butter at room temperature, a 14-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk at room temperature, and 2 tablespoons of chopped pecans. Some people say pecans, but I say pecans. Here's how you make this yummy cake. Place a piece of parchment paper on a baking sheet and toast the coconut in the oven at 350 degrees for 4 minutes. Now keep an eye on it. It will burn fast. Take it from the oven and let it cool. Then you're going to combine sugar, flour, eggs, baking soda, vanilla, and the crushed undrained pineapple to a large bowl. Mix well with a spoon. The mixture will be lumpy because of the pineapple, but make sure you scrape the bowl and get it all well combined. Now this recipe reminds me of making a hummingbird cake or a pig picking cake. I've made both in the past and they are delicious. But back to the recipe. You're going to take the batter and spread it into a 9x13 baking dish that has been greased with cooking spray. Bake it for 30 to 40 minutes in a 350 degree oven and remove it when you can insert a toothpick in the center and it comes out clean. Place it on the counter to cool. In a smaller mixing bowl, combine the butter, sweetened condensed milk, and mix with a hand mixer or stand mixer, whatever you have, on medium speed for at least 8 minutes or until it's smooth and creamy. Then you'll spread the frosting on the cake. Now Jess says it's okay if the cake is not fully cool before you start frosting because it'll melt into the cake and make it extra moist. Me, I prefer a fully cooled cake before I start to frost, but whatever you want to do, it's your cake, do you. The last step is to top the cake with the coconut and the chopped pecans, and then grab a big slice with a glass of milk or whatever else you want to drink. And that is the recipe for Do Nothing Cake. I have one more recipe for you. This recipe is 117 years old. It's called the 1905 salad. It comes from Columbia Restaurant in Tampa, Florida. Shout out to Florida. They've been having a series of terrible hurricanes. And shout out to my friends Courtney and Nikki. I'm glad you guys are okay. Now, why does Columbia Restaurant call it the 1905 salad? That's easy. It's the year the restaurant opened. Here's the recipe. A half cup of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1 to 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar, 1 to 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Say that 3 times fast. 3 cloves of garlic, 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, and salt and pepper to taste. For the salad, you'll need 1 head of iceberg lettuce, a half a pound of ham slices, julienne, 1/3 pound of Swiss cheese, julienne, 10 ounces of cherry tomatoes, half, 5 ounces of green olives, sliced, a half of a red onion, sliced very thin, 5 ounces of croutons. If you don't like croutons like me, you don't have to put them in, and 2 ounces of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, finely grated. Combine all of your ingredients in a bowl and toss with the dressing. And after you're done, you can top it with the freshly grated Parmesan cheese. Now, I don't have a problem with iceberg lettuce, and this sounds delicious. I think I'll be making it later this weekend. Now let's get ready for our final stop, Pakistan. I am partial and biased when it comes to Pakistan because I found the most creative and talented artist to work with on some of my projects. A young woman from Pakistan designed my logo for 21 Blue Lash and all of the artwork. I also hired a young man to design the looks for some of my twins for 21 Blue Lash. And I have recently hired another young man that designs all of my book covers for my series, Platerius. Now, I've worked with other artists, but there's just something about Pakistani artists. I think they put a lot of pride into their work. And for me, they're extremely professional and easy to work with. But today, we're going to talk about a lost city of Pakistan's that once held 40,000 people. Now, usually when we talk about lost cities, we're talking about ancient Egypt or Rome and Greece. Seldom do we hear anything about Pakistan, but I am a lover of ancient history, so I thought this story would be pretty cool to bring to you guys. This ancient city is located in southern Pakistan. It's called Mohenjo-Daro, and it means Mound of the Dead Men. Mohenjo-Daro prospered from 2500 to 1700 BCE. A local guide, whose name is Irshad Ali Solangi, says it was an urban center that had social, cultural, economic, and religious linkages with Mesopotamia and Egypt. Now, we know of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, but we've heard very little about Mohenjo-Daro. By 1700 BCE, it was abandoned, and no one knows why. The ancient city was discovered in 1911, but the Archaeological Survey of India dismissed the bricks as not having any kind of antiquity, and the site remained undisturbed for several more years. In 1922, R.D. Banerjee, an ASI officer, said he saw a mound-like structure where Buddhists typically meditated, and this led to excavations by British archaeologist Sir John Marshall, and Mohenjo-Daro was said to be the best preserved ruin of the Indus Valley. Here's what I found interesting. Drainage and private toilets were only for the rich in Egypt and Mesopotamia, but in Mohenjo-Daro, concealed toilets and covered drains were for everybody. Not only did they find private baths, they found a large great bath used by the community. They also had what is called a sophisticated citywide sewage system. Now, what does that mean? It means they were clean people. They washed their behinds. I wouldn't be surprised if they used wash rags. The people of Mohenjo-Daro were also conscientious of their environment. They built drainage systems to protect themselves from annual floods. And they played a key role in a sea trade network where they produced pottery, jewelry, figurines, and other items. The sea trade network extended from Central Asia to the Middle East. Today, the historical site has been turned into a local park with picnic tables and very nice gardens. And these beautiful ancient people also had building materials. That's right. We like to think that we're the smartest just because we're in our time. But I'm going to tell you something. People that were born in ancient times were not stupid. They got the job done just as we do. And most importantly, without the things we rely on. The bricks they made to build their city have survived for thousands of years. Well-preserved artifacts have also been found, including 2 sculptures, one of a young woman wearing jewelry and an intricate hairstyle, and the other was a well-groomed man who appeared to be of high status. Uzma Z. Rizvi is an archaeologist and an associate professor at Brooklyn's Pratt Institute. She says, this elite gentleman, we don't know if he was a priest or a king, shows us an attention to detail when it comes to physical adornment and physical care. This gives us insight into how the inhabitants were treating themselves, their bodies. Clearly, there is an understanding of mathematics. Clearly, there is an understanding of geometry. Clearly, there is an understanding of fashion. Now, although they found all these beautiful things, they still can't decode their language. I hope they do, because we can learn so much from the people of Mohenjo-Daro. And researchers say they don't know what happened to the people. They suspect climate factors might have played a role, but the people didn't disappear all at once. According to Rizvi, the city itself did not suddenly evacuate. Around 1900 BCE, you see a shift happen. Fewer traces of people living in the city start to emerge in the material record. It's not that everyone is gone, but there are certain neighborhoods that you begin to see in disrepair. These later time periods do not have the same density of population as earlier time periods. You see the slow movement of people leaving the city. Some say the city might be in danger now because superfloods have been hitting Pakistan as early as August 2022. But according to Dr. Asma Ibrahim, the flooding to the site was less than archaeologists had originally feared. Ibrahim recommended the use of channels to divert excess water away from the site, but says a long-term strategy is needed. Well, let's hope they can pool their resources together to preserve what's left of Mohenjo-Daro. I suspect we have a lot to learn from this ancient city. And shout out to our new friends in Pakistan who have also joined the Amisogyny podcast. And shout out to all the brilliant artists I've met over the years. Especially you, T. Thank you for making my book covers works of art. And with that, I'm out of time. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to follow me. By now you know where. Podbean, Spotify, Samsung, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music, and more. The weekend is here, you guys. We made it through another week. But before I go, let me give a huge shout out to the new countries that have joined the Amisogyny podcast. Egypt and Costa Rica. Welcome, friends, and thank you so much for your support. I will be back with more stories. So I want you to be easy and take care of yourselves. Until then, have fun and be safe. And as always, God